we got a good one today. Garmin Epix Gen 2 Pro and Fenix 7 Pro series. What are they all about? We're going to talk about that today. What's up? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dave from Chase to Summit, and these are two brand new devices from Garmin. I've got the brand new Garmin Fenix 7 Pro and the Epix Gen 2 Pro. They're Pro now. And I know what you're probably thinking, didn't the Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2 just come out? Yes, they did about a year and a half ago. However, these new models bring some welcome additions and features to the table that a lot of you have been asking for in the comments of my videos, so I think some of you might be pretty excited about these new Pro models. I've been testing the new Epix Pro and Fenix 7 Pro for about a week now, and in this video today, I want to try to break down exactly what's new about these new Pro flagship devices, because it gets pretty darn confusing because of how many different versions are out there right now. On top of that, we'll also go through some of my test data, and at the end of this video, I'll try to wrap it all up with my final thoughts and conclusions on who I think these devices are for. With that out of the way, let's dive right into the madness and the most confusing part of this video: options and sizes. The naming convention here is pretty confusing because in the past, like on the previous Garmin Fenix 6 series, for example, the Pro model wasn't actually the most expensive or feature packed. There was the Standard Edition, the Pro Edition, and then the Sapphire Edition, which had all the bells and whistles. This time around, however, with the new Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro, Garmin has changed that. So let's start with the Fenix 7. The existing models from the Fenix 7 series are going to be the Fenix 7 Standard Non-Solar Edition, the Fenix 7 Solar Edition, and then the top dog in the existing lineup is the Fenix 7 Solar Sapphire Edition. Now, when it comes to the Fenix 7 Pro series, there's two new additions to the lineup here, and that's going to be the Fenix 7 Pro Solar with Gorilla Glass, and then there's the Fenix 7 Pro Solar Sapphire. So effectively, with the existing Fenix 7 lineup in these new Pro models, there are now 5 different versions of the Fenix 7. And on top of that, there's also 3 different size options of all 5 versions. And of course, on top of all the different sizes and versions, there's also different colors and materials to choose from the stainless steel models to the titanium models, which cost a little bit more. And I'm not going to go through all the different versions and SKUs in this video because it would get to be kind of boring and long. Instead, I'll put some links in the description down below that you can click on to see all the different versions available. And as a quick note, with the Fenix 7 Pro series, all of the models now have solar. There is no standard edition or non-solar version of the Fenix 7 Pro. Now that we've talked about the Fenix 7 Pro series, let's move along to the Epix Pro series because this gets pretty interesting. I've got the original Epix Gen 2 here, and this watch came in 2 different versions. The existing models of the Epix Gen 2 are the Standard Edition with a Gorilla Glass lens, and then the Sapphire Edition with a Sapphire lens. And one important thing to note about the original Epix Gen 2 is that it only came in one size option at 47 millimeters in diameter. And this was a huge complaint for a lot of people out there because, trust me, I read it in the comments a lot on these videos. Some people wanted the bigger watch and that 51 millimeter form factor for more battery life and things like that, and some people even wanted a smaller option for smaller wrists, and that just simply wasn't available on the Epix Gen 2. And now it is. Those 3 different size options are exactly the same as the Fenix 7 series. You've got a 42 millimeter version for the smallest option, then there's the 47 millimeter version for the middle of the road, and then the biggest one is the 51 millimeter version. And of course, on top of the 2 versions of the Epix Pro in the 3 different sizes, there's again a whole bunch of different colors and materials to choose from. On the topic of the Epix Pro, I do want to quickly talk about the display size. If you go for that 47 millimeter form factor in the middle of the road, you will get a 1.3 inch AMOLED display, just like the original Epix Gen 2, so it's the same there. However, you can now get the larger form factor at this 51 millimeter diameter, that's the one I have here, and this one has a 1.4 inch AMOLED display, which is a really big display. And you can see just on the table here, there's a notable difference and you get a lot more screen real estate on the Epix Pro 51mm. And of course, on top of that, there is the smaller option, the 42mm version of the Epix Pro, where you do get a 1.2 inch AMOLED display. It's a little bit smaller, but still totally usable, and it's great for the smaller wrists. And I do want to quickly let you know what Pro models I have here on my desk. On the left side of the screen is the Epix 2 Pro 51mm form factor and this is the Sapphire version. And on the right side of your screen is the Fenix 7X Pro Sapphire Solar. That's a long name. So it's got the Sapphire lens with solar, and it's the larger 7X form factor. And you can see side by side, these two watches look very similar, and really the only difference is going to boil down to one having that AMOLED touch-enabled display, and the other being a memory and pixel transflective display, which is still touch-enabled. So on the original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2, there was a difference in features depending whether or not you chose the Standard Edition or the Sapphire Edition. The Standard Edition did not get multi-band GNSS, and it had less internal storage than the Sapphire Edition. Now on these new Pro models, they're all the same. So if you choose the Standard Edition or the Sapphire Edition, you're going to get multi-band GNSS, and you do get 32 gigabytes of storage on all models, which is great. Are you confused yet? I hope not. I'm trying to help, and I'm gonna take a quick break here to remind you that if you find this video useful or helpful or educational or anything, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. Okay, let's move on. Now let's move into the thing you probably care about the most because it's your money. Pricing. The Fenix 7 Pro is going to start at $799 for the standard model, and it goes all the way up to $1,000 for the titanium solar sapphire model, being the most expensive. The Epix 2 Pro, however, starts at $899 for the standard edition and goes all the way up to $1,099 for the titanium sapphire model, and that's a lot of money. Keep in mind that all of that pricing is based on US dollars. It will vary depending where you are in the world. Moving right along, let's talk about the hardware and design compared to the original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2. As you can see here, these watches all look identical. There's really no difference in design between the Fenix 7, the Fenix 7 Pro, and the Epix Gen 2 Pro. When it comes to the physical hardware though, I did try to get really critical and find some differences between these watches. And one thing I did notice is that the buttons on the new Fenix 7 and Epix Pro feel a little bit better than the original Fenix 7. Now, I don't know if these are just the models that Garmin sent me or whether or not they actually changed something in the button design, but I will say that the click of the buttons on the Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro is more satisfying than on the Epix and Fenix 7. Again, I don't know if there's a difference there. It's just something I noticed, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Another thing that's the same on the Fenix 7 and Fenix 7 Pro is the display. They're both using the same memory and pixel display that's transflective. However, there are some changes on the Fenix 7 Pro. Again, these are subtle differences, but what I noticed between the Fenix 7 Pro and non-Pro is that the backlight of the Pro version is a little bit punchier, it's a little bit brighter, it's a little bit crisper and has more contrast, and it's easier to read at various angles. And I don't know if that's a change in the LCD display or the glass or what they're doing here. All I can say is that it's a little bit nicer on the Fenix 7 Pro. Another thing that Garmin tweaked under the hood that they didn't really advertise in their media information is that they changed how the backlight settings work. So on the left is the Fenix 7X Pro, and on the right is the Fenix 7X. And as you can see in the backlight settings of each watch, it's a little bit different. Where on the Fenix 7 Pro, you do have an auto backlight option. This option at the time of filming this video just doesn't exist on my Fenix 7X yet. I don't know if that's coming down the road, if it's a planned update or not, but that's something that is present on the Fenix 7X Pro. Now let's talk about the user interface on these new Pro models. And again, it's basically the same as the original Epix and Fenix 7. You get the same widgets, the same widget glances, everything's touch enabled so I can swipe around. You've got the same quick selection menu that you can pop into and scroll around to do various things. It's basically all the same, so I'm not gonna spend a ton of time here. However, I did notice a couple of things in the user interface. So if I dive into an activity like a run and start the activity, and then I wanna go back and view some of my widgets, I noticed that if I hold this button, it will bring me to this new tile view of all of my widgets. And then I can actually scroll through all of the widgets that are available on my home screen rather than going back to the watch face and then scrolling through them. It allows you to jump right into what you need from here, which is kind of cool. Another thing I noticed on the Epix Pro and Fenix 7 Pro is a new system setting for backup and restore, as you can see here. And if I dive into that, you can see that it's got automatic backups enabled. And if I scroll down, I can also trigger a manual backup. And it says my last backup was around midnight last night. The new backup and restore option on the Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro is a welcome addition for me, at least, as a guy with multiple watches. It's a great way to back up all of your settings on one watch and transfer them over to another watch very seamlessly. When it comes to battery life on the new Epix Gen 2 Pro and Fenix 7 Pro, again, they're basically the same as the original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2. Now, this gets a little bit confusing. When it comes to the Fenix 7 Pro, across the board, all of the numbers are nearly identical, and I'll put some charts on the screen now. You can see that the Fenix 7S, the Fenix 7, and the Fenix 7X share identical numbers in terms of claimed specs when it comes to battery life between all the models as these new Pro models. And that's not really a surprise. They've got the same displays, similar features, similar computers inside and CPUs and all that. However, things get a lot more confusing when we're talking about the new Garmin Epix Gen 2 Pro, because if we look at the 47mm form factor from the original Epix, the numbers when it comes to battery life are identical between the Epix Gen 2 and the Epix Gen 2 Pro in that 47mm form factor. But there's more to consider here, because now on the Epix Gen 2 Pro, there are two additional sizes to choose from. There's the smaller 42mm form factor, which will get you significantly less battery life because it's a smaller case size. And then there's the new 51mm form factor, which is way bigger, and that'll get you a lot more battery life. And you can see on the chart here that you're getting some pretty impressive battery specs on the new Epix Gen 2 Pro 51mm form factor. And what I found particularly interesting about the 51mm case size is that in some situations, like in smartwatch mode, you're actually getting more battery life on the Epix Gen 2 51mm form factor as compared to the Fenix 7X Pro in the 51mm form factor, despite having that OLED display, which is kind of surprising. Of course, these are default settings and not using the always-on display. In terms of real-life battery experience and how long these are lasting, again, I've only had them for about a week, but these are holding up really well when it comes to battery life. I haven't charged either one yet, and I've been using them every day, so I'm pretty impressed so far. With all that out of the way, let's dive into the real exciting new features on the new Epix Pro and Fenix 7 Pro. And the first thing I want to talk about is going to be the flashlight. As many of you know, the original Fenix 7X that launched about a year and a half ago came with a built-in flashlight. However, the flashlight was only available on this Fenix 7X in the largest 51mm case size. So if you wanted a smaller watch like the 42mm version or 47mm version, you had to sacrifice that flashlight, which was kind of a bummer. And just as an aside, when the flashlight first came out on these watches, I thought it was a bit of a gimmick and something I would never use. However, after living with this watch and multiple watches with flashlights built into them, I can say this is a feature I really value and something I miss when I don't have it built into my watch. And like I said previously, only the bigger watches got the flashlight built into it. You had the Garmin Enduro 2 and the Instinct 2X and the Fenix 7X. They all had the flashlight, but they were all really big. Now on the new Fenix 7 Pro and Epix 2 Pro lineup, every watch has the built-in flashlight. So it could be the 42mm form factor, which I don't have here. That'll have a flashlight, all the way up to the big ones here with the 51mm case size, which also have flashlights. There's flashlights across the board now. So no matter what you choose or what size wrist you have, there's an option for everybody, and you get a flashlight, which is super exciting in my opinion at least. Now in terms of the brightness on these new flashlights on the Pro models, on the Epix and the Fenix 7 Pro, they're a little bit brighter as compared to the original Fenix 7X. And I think that's because they actually got the flashlight from the Enduro 2, which came out a little after the Fenix 7X, and got a slightly brighter flashlight. And that's the case here as well. Moving right along, let's dive into a new feature on the Epix Pro. This is called Redshift mode. And as the title implies, if I turn it on, it basically turns everything on your screen red. Why would you want to do this? Well, because these AMOLED displays are very bright and they can be kind of distracting and obtrusive in some situations. If you're out camping in a really dark environment, maybe you're hunting or something like that, or even in some kind of tactical situation. I'm not sure what you do, but a really bright light on your wrist when a notification pops up can be a little bit distracting. Not only that, but studies have proven that bright lights coming from these kinds of screens are bad for your overall sleep and wellness when you're trying to wind down at the end of the day. So now you can turn on Redshift mode when you're closing in on bedtime and kind of wind down and not have that bright display in your face all the time. The really cool thing about this Redshift mode on the Epix Pro is that it affects everything on the watch. And if you're familiar with something like the Apple Watch Ultra, for example, it had a similar Redshift mode, mode, but it only affected the watch face. So if you're telling the time of day or something like that, it would be red. But as soon as you push a button and dive into your features and settings and things like that, it would come back to life and be full color. Now on the Epix Pro, you can go through all of your settings and widgets and things like that, and everything's red. It's the same user experience, it's just red. The next new thing I want to talk about on the new Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro is going to be an updated heart rate sensor. This is pretty exciting. So as you can see here, the heart rate sensor on these new watches looks a little different as compared to this older watch. This is the original Epix here. It's not only a little bit larger, but it's also got this kind of diamond-like shape appearance in there. And what I've noticed with this new heart rate sensor here is there's actually more LEDs that illuminate your skin when you're wearing the watch. There's actually 6 LEDs now. You've got 4 in the corners and 2 in the middle. Where on the original heart rate sensor here on the Epix, you can see that there were only 2 LEDs in the center there. And what does that mean for accuracy? Well, good stuff. Generally speaking, throughout all of my activities and analyzing them after the fact, these new heart rate sensors on these new Pro devices are doing a great job. And the reality is I didn't really have a major complaint with the heart rate sensor on the Forerunner 965 or this Epix or the Fenix 7. They all did a pretty good job. However, there was a difference because on the Enduro 2 and the Fenix 7X, these larger watches on my wrist, I've got kind of a small wrist. When I wore the big watch on my small wrist, it would move around a little bit, and that would give me some variations in the accuracy. There would be some drops or spikes here and there that just weren't accounted for. And I noticed on these new models, even though these are the bigger 51mm form factors, there's a lot less of that. Again, I've only had these watches for about a week, but I will continue to test these and I'll report back if anything changes, but so far it's looking pretty promising. Moving right along to the next new feature I want to talk about, which is actually 2 features, are 2 new metrics for training called Endurance Score and Hill Score. And as you can see here, as I scroll through my menu and my widgets, when I get to this point, you'll see a new graph and score for Hill Score, and below that is Endurance Score. Now, the Endurance Score, if I dive into it here, is meant to provide additional insight into your training by not only giving you an estimated VO2 max, but also a score on how your training is improving your endurance over time. In Garmin's documentation, they say that relying on your estimated VO2 max solely doesn't tell you the whole story when it comes to training for longer distance activities like an ultra marathon. And that's where this Endurance Score is aimed to improve your overall insight into this kind of training. And this new metric takes both your short-term and your long-term performance, looking back up to 3 months in your history to generate the score. And as you can see here, my score is 6,440. It says that I'm trained, and if I back out of this, it puts me in the yellow on the graph. So that's not great. I thought my endurance would be higher than that because I've been training for a 100-mile ultra marathon. I don't know if that's because I've only been wearing the watch for about a week and it needs more time to work on this, but hopefully my endurance is better than that. Time will tell. Moving into the Hill Score, which is the other new metric, this score is based from a 0 to 100 scale, and this is calculated by using a combination of fitness and performance data over time. Just like with VO2 max, the higher the better when it comes to your Hill Score. So for me, I'm a 36 right now, which puts me kind of on the lower end of the spectrum. I was hoping for higher. Again, as somebody who trains on hills, I thought I would do better than this, but this might be some insight that I need. Now, if I scroll down, I do get more information about my Hill Score, like my Hill Endurance Score. That's how much endurance I have on that uphill activity. And below that, I've got a Hill Strength Score. And at the bottom here, it does display my estimated VO2 max, which does tie into this overall metric. So this score will classify you from recreational to challenger to elite to try to let you know where you land in the landscape of other runners in your age group. And again, with this metric, with the Hill Score, I'm still not totally sure how to utilize it, but I do plan on focusing on my Hill Score in the future to see if I can improve it. And again, I will report back if I learn anything new about it. Moving right along, I want to talk about mapping and navigation in one new feature on these Pro models called Up Ahead. If you're familiar with the original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2, these watches also came with a feature called Up Ahead. And what it did is when you had a pre-designed course, like you're running a race and you put the course on your watch, you could put in waypoints for your next aid station or a water source or something like that. And Up Ahead would break down your waypoints into a list form to let you know how far ahead your next aid station was. And this was a really useful feature. However, on the new Epix Pro and Fenix 7 Pro, Garmin's changed that a little bit and taken it one step further. Now, on the map view during your activity, when you've got a pre-designed course with waypoints, you'll actually see the icons for your waypoints on the map. Honestly, this is something I've always wanted Garmin to do. I've always used waypoints for all of my races and big activities, and now seeing those icons on the map is really useful. The next new feature I want to talk about on these new Pro devices is the inclusion of weather map overlays, which is super cool, but also a little bit quirky. The new weather map overlay on the Fenix 7 Pro and Epix 2 Pro will include things like precipitation, cloud coverage, temperature, and wind speed on a map view that you can display while you're out in the wild, which is really cool. However, there are some limitations here. So the weather map view is only available within the weather widget on these watches. It's not available on the map view when you're in an activity. So if you start a hiking or trail running activity and you go off on your run or hike, you're not going to be able to navigate over to that weather map page simply by scrolling through your data pages. You actually have to leave your activity, go back to your watch face, dive into the weather widget, and then you can view the weather map view there. A couple of other notes about the weather map overlay is that you do need cellular connectivity to sync the map overlay for weather to your watch, and without that, it will not update. So you need to keep that in mind. And the overall user experience of the weather map overlay is a little bit glitchy at the time of filming this video. It seems like when you zoom in or zoom out, things tend to take a while to reload, and at certain zoom levels, it won't display information. I hope they can work on that in a firmware update, and by the release of this video, hopefully that's fixed. But for now, it's a little bit glitchy, but it's still very useful and a pretty cool feature I hope they can improve on. Moving into activity profiles, this is another area where the Pro models have received a slight upgrade. So previously on the Epix Gen 2 and the Fenix 7, these watches have a ton of activity profiles, everything from running, trail running, etc., to racket sports, to water sports, to snow sports, to triathlon and multi-sport mode. There's a lot on these watches. However, on the new Pro models, they've actually added a few more activity profiles. And as you can see here, it's specific to team sports. So we've got soccer, we've got American football, basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, cricket, lacrosse, rugby, field hockey, ice hockey, etc., even ultimate frisbee. And on top of these team sports, there's also a new horseback riding mode. We have finally reached the point in the video where I want to talk about my final thoughts and conclusions about the new Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro from Garmin. The first thing I want to talk about, it's kind of the elephant in the room here, is if you're an existing user of a Fenix 7 or Epix Gen 2, and you're probably looking down at your wrist right now and wondering if you're going to get a firmware update to get some of these new features on your original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2, like the weather map overlay, the new activities, some of the other bells and whistles that were introduced here. Will you get that via a firmware update? Well, the answer to that question is maybe. I did ask Garmin specifically whether or not these older devices like the Fenix 7, Epix Gen 2, Enduro 2, Tactic 7 would get some of these features via firmware. And they optimistically said maybe, likely, it probably will happen, but they did not explicitly come out and say definitely yes or definitely no, or what features would actually be trickling down. I am optimistic, I am hopeful, I'll keep my fingers crossed, but that's all I can tell you right now. And when it does come to the Fenix 7 Pro and Epix Pro and whether or not you should get one, I think we fall into a couple of camps here. If you are an existing user of the Fenix 7 or Epix Gen 2, do you need to upgrade to one of these new Pro models? Probably not. You do get an updated heart rate sensor, you do have more size options in the Epix lineup, which is nice, and some of these features might sell you on these new models. However, the original Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2 are still amazing watches, and they're still very relevant, they're not being obsoleted, and in fact, they're still going to remain in the Garmin lineup for sale on Garmin.com and Amazon and all the places alongside these new Pro versions. So don't think that the Fenix 7 and Epix Gen 2 are going away. These new Pro models are just additional options to choose from. However, if you fall into the other camp and you don't actually have a Fenix 7 or Epix Gen 2 already, and you're in the market for a new GPS watch or running watch or hiking watch, should you get one of these new Fenix 7 Pros or Epix Pros? And the answer there is yes, if you can afford it. These watches are very expensive. Yes, they are feature packed and they're probably the best on the market right now when it comes to features and accuracy and mapping navigation and balancing all that with incredible battery life. These are really impressive, but the Epix Gen 2 Pro coming in at $1,000, over $1,000 for the Sapphire model, and $1,000 for the Sapphire model on the Fenix 7 Pro is a lot to ask. And for a lot of people out there, that's probably going to be over your budget. And if it is, there are cheaper alternatives out there. However, if you do have the funds and you want the best of the best and you want the flagship model from Garmin, these are the models you're gonna wanna look at because they are really impressive. And some of you might be wondering, what model am I most excited about? And that's an easy answer, and that's going to be the 51mm Epix Pro, because I've always liked the original Epix Gen 2. I love the OLED display, and the battery life was pretty good. And now with the 51mm version, you get a bigger battery, incredible battery life, you get a bigger display with the nice OLED display, and on top of that, you get the built-in flashlight and an updated heart rate sensor. So this is the watch I'm probably gonna wear moving forward, but again, I swap out all the time, so time will tell. And now's the point in the video where I want to hear from you. Are you interested in the Fenix 7 Pro or Epix 2 Pro? Are you gonna be getting one of these watches? Let me know in the comments down below what features sold you on them, or if you're just gonna skip them and go with the Fenix 7 or something entirely different. Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And with that, we have finally reached the end of this video, and if you're still watching, you probably enjoyed this video. And if you did, please consider going down and giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below, because that really helps me out. Also, if you're planning on picking up the Fenix 7 Pro, the Epix Pro, or any watch I've showed in this video, I'll have links to everything in the description down below, and those links do help support this channel, but they cost nothing extra to you, so you might as well use them. By the way, go check out my podcast that I do on a weekly basis, where I'll probably be talking about these watches more, and I think that's it for this one. I'll see you next time. Bye!